Hey up, I wanted to make an Anjanath from Monster Hunter World, so I did. Here's what I did. Now I'm going to be making this out of clay, so I started by wrapping a chunk of wood in aluminium foil, as later down the line it'll be easier to peel the sculpture off the block. Then I started making the armature wire and fitting it to the block, and you might already notice he has one giant shiny shoe, and that's because this guy is going to be stood with one foot on a giant rock. It's overdone, but it's cool. And I can bulk up the model with foil in an appropriate T-Rex chicken thing shape to save on the amount of clay I'm going to have to use, as I'm nearly out at this point. Now I'm going to be using Cos clay. Now this is a polymer based clay, which means it has to bake in the oven in order to cure. Now if you're anything like me and you don't know what you're doing and have no idea how weight distribution works, then you'll make the feet of your model way too small and have way too many cracks, which I think I covered them up pretty well, but you'll never see. Now this is just a case of slapping clay onto the model in thin layers to get a good even coverage, and I'm sure I've totally not done these way too thin and it won't come back to bite me in any way later on and have to spend countless hours covering up bits of poking out foil. No, that won't happen. I'm not spiteful or anything. And I can start building up the Anjanath's basic features like his neck sack and head shape. I thought I was way out of my depth choosing something like this to sculpt, but I gained some much needed confidence after I built up the head. I originally wanted to just make a T-Rex, but I started playing Monster Hunter World again after not touching it for a couple of years, and this was just a perfect guy to make, so not too shabby so far. Then his big muscly legs get built up. Now if you're very perceptive, you'll notice I've entirely f***ed up his legs. You'll not notice it too much at the moment, but he's meant to be on his tiptoes with his ankle lifted a little bit. But you wouldn't really notice at all unless I told you, so it's a good job I didn't, right? I thought I'd do his teeth at this point because I can't stay focused on one thing at a time, so I'll roll some tiny balls of clay onto my desk and make them sharp and cut them to an appropriate size. And I'll make some more, even more, and a tiny little bit more. These then get smooshed into place, but I use some tweezers instead of my big clumsy sausage fingers. I then made his nose bone and shoved it on and moulded the clay around it to make it stick. Then I extended his tail out fully and made a tongue. Now polymer based clays get cured via heat, but instead of using an oven I'm just going to use a heat gun because it's quicker. Then I can shove the tongue in his mouth without it getting deformed in the process. Now remember that rock? Well, it's just foil at the minute, so it needs to be a rock. So we're going to add some clay to that, and I've found that the best ways to make a rock look rocky is with actual rocks. So I'm going to bash the rocks into my rock to make it more rocky. You need some little feetsies, so I'll add these to the model just before sliding more claws into them, just like I did with the mouth. It's pretty self-explanatory. His little noodle arms are just thin armature wire that's pushed into his body and then bulked up around the rest of the body. His clawless hands get claws, and then I sat back and looked at the real Anjanath's hands and looked at my Anjanath's hands and thought, well, this just looks shit. So I rolled up some small, even-sized balls of clay and clicked my fingers to make perfect Anjanath hands. I got to work de-handing my former Anjanath hands and attached new hands which are at least half bearable to look at. At this point I'm just hopping around again, so some more detailing gets done to the face and neck in the form of veins and wrinkles, and it's really important at this point to make sure that the camera only focuses on my hand. This stuff is isopropanol alcohol, and I can use it to get rid of any fingerprints or marks that I might have accidentally pressed onto the clay while sculpting. I also find that it blends in the clay quite nicely in smaller, harder to reach areas. Moving on to the fur, I'm pressing and scratching into the clay and then using more and more alcohol to blend it all together, and then rinse and repeat all over the Anjanath's back. Now hold on, because if my genius has frightened you so far, wait until I bulk up his back with some foil in an attempt to save some clay, just to remove it in 10 seconds, because I can't get it to work. Yeah. This is a little negative roller I made for my last project, and I've used this to rub on the lower part to give it a bumpy base layer, which I'm going to inevitably go over and retexture anyway. And now that I'm thinking about it, it's a bit of a waste of time really. But yeah, this is what he's looking like so far. He's all ready to go in the oven for his first full bake. Looks alright, doesn't it? Alright, it's time for his wings, and I found some old welding rods in my garage, but it's got all this coating shit all over it, so I improvised with my drill. This was really satisfying. Drilling some holes into the model, I'll attach all the rods and then clip them to size and wrap them all in clay. Now, it may not look like it, but this part was possibly the most finicky and monotonous process I've done. Nevertheless, here he is, all done, ready for his final bake. My gaming turned sculpting setup gets turned into a gaming turned painting setup, and we can get started with all the painting. I'll coat the skin and fur with a very thin layer of their respective colours and begin annihilating my girlfriend's makeup brushes by dry brushing progressively lighter and lighter colours where necessary. I don't really need to explain much when it comes to the painting process, so I'm just going to let this play out. This is my first time using UV resin, because I wanted to have a little puddle of water on the base later on, but I thought I might as well give the eyes a bit of a shine to them as well. I also wanted the mouth to look extra terrifying, so I'm using some Fabri-Tac glue, which dries completely clear so it's perfect for saliva and it scoops it all up nicely. That's it, he's all done. Time to make a base. Now for this, I'm going to use a mixture of hole filler, Mod Podge, mud coloured paints, and a different assortment of rocks and sands. And I'll mix all this stuff together, spread it all over the base and wait for it to dry. I'll bust out my static grass applicator and sprinkle it wherever I feel needs grass. I bought a whole bunch of tufts that you'd commonly see on like tiny Warhammer 40k models, and I thought these yellow flowers looked pretty good, so I'm showing my appreciation by patting them all on their head. We're pretty much done at this point, but the last thing I need to do is pour this tiny resin pond. I tried to add some ripple texture from where his foot would have stomped, but it didn't really work at all, so I salvaged it somehow. Once that's all cured, just lock in for a second and prepare yourselves for the glamour shots.